The community in Ferguson, Missouri is on edge as residents anxiously await the grand jury's decision. A failure to indict police officer Darren Wilson could spark an outburst of anger. Demonstrators have been demanding justice for Michael Brown Jr. since Wilson fatally shot and killed him in August. Law enforcement agencies are on high alert. The Reverend Osagyefo Sekou has been at the center of the protest, and Stephen King owns the gun shop Metro Shooting Supplies, and he joins us from Bridgeton, Missouri, and the Reverend is joining us as well. Welcome to both of you to Arise America. I do appreciate having you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, dear brother.
Thank you so much. You know what? I want to start with you, Reverend. First of all, you know, there have been calls for peaceful protests. The family of Michael Brown Jr., Leslie McSpadden, and Michael Brown Sr. have asked that the residents of Ferguson and all of those who come into the area to protest peacefully. Do you think that the citizens will honor their request if there is not an indictment for Darren Wilson?
Well, it seems the case that the question is impoverished. It is predicated on a notion that that it ignores the fact that for over 100 some odd days that the protests have been overwhelmingly nonviolent and that they have been met with repression over and against their First Amendment rights. We have a community that is traumatized, that is broken by virtue of the fact that they have had a life that is experienced with high levels of police repression and police harassment through things like excessive ticketing and the St. Louis version of stop and frisk. But in the midst of all of this, a community of mostly young people who have been betrayed by every level of government, civil society, somehow, some way have made a way out of no way, and they've been largely nonviolent for over 100 days, and they should be celebrated in keeping alive the best of the democratic tradition, the best of the American tradition of nonviolent civil disobedience that gave me the right to vote, that gave women the right to vote, and stretched the Constitution to include people who historically were not included.
And that is so eloquently said, but the fact is, certainly, if history is indication, even amongst the peaceful protesters and those who were exercising their constitutional rights for assembly and civil disobedience, there was an element there that created chaos and unrest. And so I want to turn in our conversation over to Stephen, and that has created fear, and not only in the Ferguson community, but also in the surrounding communities in St. Louis. Stephen, I know that you have had an increase in gun sales since all of this. Can you sort of tell me how your business has been affected by this incident?
Well, in August, we saw a very small portion of our community in uprise. We had burning buildings, we had looted stores, we had anger and violence that was sprawling down West Florissant. So we were able to, this only affected a small group of people, the Ferguson folks, the surrounding areas of Hazelwood, Florissant, Berkeley, Bridgeton. These guys were affected by it in a little bit with fear. What's different about it now is that for the past 3 months, through social media and through public speaking and through the newspapers and the law enforcement sector, the public has been told that this is going to be widespread and violent, and there was no way to determine where this was going to crop up. What happens, you have 3.3 million people wondering where the problem is going to start. So now you've got a lot of people concerned and a lot of people arming themselves because they know that the police departments will be stretched so thin handling the protesters and the demonstrators that they will not be able to answer 911 calls to protect them in their individual homes.
So how many more guns have you sold in proportion to what you would normally do at this time of year?
Right now, just the fact from the first week of November to now, our sales are up 400%. Our number of firearms are up anywhere between 300 and 800%, depending on which day of the week you're talking about. And, I want to make it very clear that the media has made it look like this is a black-white issue and that it is, a problem that, can't be solved peacefully. And I disagree with that on both fronts. And I do believe that I hope that St. Louis can pull its roots and show everybody that it can be a very peaceful place and we can get to this with a peaceful ending. My problem is the splinter groups, the people that are deep inside these groups that don't want to listen to the leadership. They don't want to listen to the...
Let me jump in there, Stephen, because I want to get the Reverend to respond to what you're saying. Before you do, Reverend Stephen, let me just ask you, you said you don't think that this is a black-white thing. Has there been a diversity amongst your customers or mainly white?
Oh, absolutely diversity. I mean, we service the entire North County area, and most of my customers from here in North County, I've got 50%, it's 50% white, 50% black, and inside there, those are large numbers. Inside that group, I've got Asians and Hispanics, I've got Bosnians, I've got everybody, because we're a very diverse city. And this is not about black and white. This is about people buying firearms because they're scared to death of the potential violence of this criminal element. And the Reverend said there for 100 days we haven't seen that. If he remembers, or maybe he doesn't remember, back in October during the World Series, the Cardinal games, or the playoffs, the Cardinal games were people demonstrating out there and getting beaten up at Busch Stadium.
Let me jump in there, Steve. I'm sorry.
So let us be clear. Let's be clear that at the Cardinals games and other places, people were attacked by folks who are attending the games, and there is a deep racial element. I want you to just close your eyes and think for a moment. Every other day in America, somebody black or brown is killed by police or vigilantes, and they get no justice. That state violence comes at black people and brown people in America that is unprecedented, to the point that the parents of Michael Brown went before the UN recently in their quest to seek justice. There will be candles lit. There will be teddy bears laid, because some mother will be preparing funeral arrangements because an unarmed black person or brown person has been killed by police. And so let us never lose sight of that. Secondly, the ideal that there is some marauding group of criminal black teens running around St. Louis, killing and destroying white folks' property is just deeply problematic. That a riot, according to Martin Luther King Jr., a riot is the language of the unheard. That these young folks who have taken to the streets and who have brought America to its knees and called her to account and said that you must hold the truths that are evident, that all of them are created equal, have been largely nonviolent, they have been largely disciplined, and that they have simply required justice. I have spent more time in jail as a protester than Darren Wilson has spent in jail, and that is simply unjust. It is egregious, and we must always never lose sight of the fact that Michael Brown's body laid in the street for 4.5 hours, and it is a shame on our democracy and a shame on the elected officials who
Reverend,
have bought...
let me jump in. You both guys, once you take the mic, you don't like to give it back, so I had to snatch it back from you. Stephen, let me just ask you, you do have experience with law enforcement. Do you think the fear that you've seen demonstrated in your customers is warranted?
Absolutely. The Reverend likes to speak eloquently, and he likes to speak of what-ifs and has-beens, but he's looking through tainted glasses. You know, what I see when I see clergy like him standing in front of groups of people, he has such an opportunity to bring peace to the community and to preach brotherhood and love and forgiveness and community togetherness. He has that opportunity, and he doesn't do that. Instead, he preaches racism, and he wants to beat the fact that he believes that their racism is so violent against black people and brown people. If he looked at the St. Louis murder statistics and he saw that we have 174 homicides so far to date, most of them black-on-black homicides, that has nothing to do with white policemen or black policemen. And let's face it.
But to be fair, Stephen, there's nobody protesting about that. The protest is because a white officer killed an unarmed black person, and that's the issue here with that. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to get the last word because we are all out of time. I want to thank you both, Stephen King and Reverend Osagyefo Sekou. We appreciate both of you and your perspective.
Thank you.
We will continue our discussion in just a moment. This is Arise America.